Zealous Racing League's second GT3 season included 15 rounds, with weekly races from 9th June 2020 running until September. It was a particularly dramatic season with a close battle between three teams, including a couple of drivers that had entered events together before, in the white Bentleys including the highly skilled Ryan Whitlock in number 8, supported by his teammate Colton Rasmussen in number 9, and also the red Aston Martins of the consistent Shade Bros racing drivers, driven by Tim Shade, number 420, and his brother Dan Shade in 421. And a couple of talented drivers in the blue Bentleys of the Madhouse Racing's Ryan Walker, number 887, paired with his fellow Canadian Carl Friesen in 888. Kenneth Portis was the highest scoring driver still on the grid from Season 1, but it was Ryan Whitlock who'd only joined a single ZRL race before, impressively taking pole for round 1 at Misano. The starts were better than the chaotic ones in the first season, but there was an incident further back. At the front, Walker had taken the lead, but Whitlock remained close by, until getting past only 3 laps before the end. So Whitlock took his first win ahead of Walker, and Dan Shade was close in third. Dan Shade went on to take pole for Brands Hatch, and in a case of sibling rivalry, his brother Tim Shade qualified second. But it wasn't long before Whitlock worked himself into the Shade sandwich, and once again proved to have the pace and consistency to stay at the front of the pack. Further back there was drama leading to cars pitting for repairs. Not long after there was more drama, as the leaders tried to overlap a car, resulting in an incident that saw Whitlock getting into first. On lap 7 Friesen moved into third, but 10 laps later lost some time as his car ended up sideways. There were 2 mandatory pit stops for this race, which shook up the order and led to the same podium as Misano, Whitlock making it 2 for 2 ahead of Walker and Tim Shade. Dan Shade finishing 5th helped keep the Shade brothers racing near the top, while the Madhouse drivers had always finished in the top 5, and Whitlock kept the Bentley team in the lead. Tony Corsaro in the only BMW took pole position at Spa-Francorchamps, but Walker led the pack. Championship leader Whitlock lost some time. His teammate Rasmussen had the same mishap later on, losing even more time, costing him 13 positions, so it wasn't looking good for the Bentley team. Walker was still leading ahead of Corsaro, but ended up backwards, leaving the BMW to take back the lead. He'd have another incident later on, dropping to 21st, but managed to get back into the top 10 before the end. After a mandatory pit stop, Corsaro crossed the line in first, followed by Dan Shade as the sun came up, and Friesen in third, helping put the blue Bentleys of the Madhouse team into first. It was not the best result for the white Bentley team, while the Shade Bros were in a strong third owing to their consistency. Corsaro started 5th at Kyalami, where Portis was on pole alongside Friesen. Lap 9 was dramatic, as Portis was backwards after contact with Friesen, who slowed down to let Portis back past. Whitlock now had an easy lead in this sprint race, but his teammate Rasmussen was not having as much fun, spinning after contact with Panda, although Rasmussen did regain some positions before the end. Tim and Corsaro battled for third, while Moriarty in second left the track and got a drive-through penalty, dropping him out of the top 3. So it was Whitlock taking the win, and he was happy about that because he was going to miss the next round and wanted as many points as he could get. It was Tim Shade and Corsaro rounding off the podium, and the Bentley team was back in first, with the Shade Bros and Madhouse tied for points. Zandvoort was a story of consistency, as there were countless spins in the poor conditions and a dramatic moment where someone lost their pedals, leaving their car stranded on track for a few seconds, and in that short space of time there was a hard collision. Only 34 minutes into the hour-long race, it was stopped due to heavy rain, and Friesen was declared the winner of round 5. The result tied the Drivers' Championship, with only 1 point separating the top 3, and the Bentley team dropping to third on the Team's Championship. The Bentley team made a strong comeback on round 6 at Monza though, where Whitlock started on pole and Rasmussen moved up to second. Although the pit stop saw him drop down to third, it would still be his first ZRL podium, and with both team cars in the top 3, it reduced Madhouse lead to only 1 point. The Bentley's start this time around could have been stronger, as at Paul Ricard Whitlock qualified no better than third, and Rasmussen started on the wrong fuel map, getting away slowly. Whitlock was briefly down to 4th, before recovering the position and battling Tim Shade for second, before moving up to first. But his teammates' race got even worse, as contact with Friesen disastrously sent him into the wall. Anthony Jones had an impressive race, converting a pole position to second, behind Whitlock taking his 5th win and importantly extending his championship lead. While it was not the best race for Rasmussen, having 2 cars on track was enough to put them well into first place. At Mount Panorama, the Bentley team had changed livery to blue and orange, and Portis took pole position. A tight and winding track, there was some drama, and many cars would bump the walls, picking up suspension damage throughout the race. Jones getting sideways on lap 3 saw Rasmussen moving up to second, but Dan Shade got collected and retired from the race, perhaps just to keep his damaged car out of the way. Rasmussen himself had a similar moment, so his teammate moved into second behind Portis. The race ended in that order, Portis taking his first win of the season, Whitlock extending his lead against his closest rivals, and Tim Shade taking third. Despite Rasmussen's crash, he regained some positions before the end and helped extend his team's lead. It was a wet race for Silverstone, where some cars were on the wrong tyre, but a mandatory pit stop offered a chance to get back onto the right ones. Scott Blair had taken pole, carefully swapping positions with Whitlock. Whitlock's teammate retired after a couple of incidents, Rasmussen finding the wall on lap 14. Blair's pit stop put Whitlock into the lead, followed by Friesen and Tim Shade. It was a good day for the Shade Bros, but Bentley remained ahead, while the points gap was widening for Madhouse as Walker had missed 3 races in a row. At Barcelona, Walker and Friesen changed livery from blue to white, and the stewards took a close look at the shunting at the start, which caused a chain of drama. Whitlock was impacted by the incident, as were some of the other drivers in the top 3 teams. Later on, Rasmussen was in trouble, and his contact partner waited for him to rejoin the race, but was later involved in another incident. No doubt it was frustrating for the Bentley drivers trying to maintain their lead of the team's championship while getting tripped up in these incidents. There were several other incidents during the race, perhaps due to how dark it was. The pit stops shook up the order, and Zach Patterson won on his first race, ahead of Tim Shade and Portis, while Whitlock had some bad luck at the start, but recovered to 4th and took the fastest lap. Now 2/3 into the season, both the drivers and teams championships were still open. Whitlock and Rasmussen only needed to be consistent to take both, but round 11 wouldn't go their way. Rasmussen would miss the next 4 races, so it was down to Whitlock to carry the team, but he didn't get pole position despite looking fast. He was beaten by Zach Patterson taking a confident pole position after his win last time out, although Patterson's game crashed during the warm-up, so it was Whitlock and Jones on the front row. It wasn't long before Patterson was battling to the front, going wheel-to-wheel with Dan Shade before pitting his underfueled car, exiting with clear air to impressively reach all the way to 4th. Jones got his first win, possibly having underfueled his car as he was slowing down at the end. Whitlock had stayed ahead of Walker to take second and could afford to lose 15 points per race now and still win the championship, potentially meaning that he didn't need to win any more races, only keep finishing on the podium. While the Bentley team only had 1 car present, neither Shade brother reached the podium, and Madhouse still had a points gap to close, so the Bentley team remained ahead. Hutchings in his first race qualified in the front row alongside Jones, and there was some chaos at the start of this 28 car grid, but the front got through the first few corners, where Whitlock was only in 7th, but importantly he was ahead of his championship rivals, in particular the Shade brothers in 8th and 12th. Rain soon started falling before it got dark, so the conditions were getting worse and many cars would spin. The Porsche cars in particular suffered the most. The front 2 drivers lost their positions. First Hutchings lost second, and then Jones lost the lead in a similar spin. Hutchings later had the consistency and speed to move into first, holding it until the end, leaving Whitlock and Patterson to battle over second. Whitlock didn't get the position this time round, fighting right up to the last corners, but importantly got the points he needed. Whitlock's championship lead was going well, and the Bentley team was still ahead, but the points were closing up. At Suzuka, Jones and Hutchings were on the front row again, with Whitlock on the second row. Whitlock, under pressure to hold on to both the drivers and teams championships, painfully lost a position to Walker, but things weren't going well for the Shade brothers either. There were no mandatory pit stops for this race, but Tim Shade had underfueled his car and made a stop, losing a lot of time. At the front, Jones and Hutchings were fighting for the lead, with things getting spicy and slowing them down to the point where Walker caught up to them. They'd finish in that order, and Whitlock took 4th, extending his lead over the only other driver still capable of winning the championship, which was Friesen finishing 6th. The team's championship was still wide open though, with any of the top 3 teams easily being able to win it. Despite their motivation to win the Drivers' Championship, None of the front 4 drivers were among the top 3 teams at Laguna Seca. Hutchings did well to take his first pole position alongside Portis, and the Shade Bros were the furthest ahead of the top 3 teams, with the Madhouse cars of Walker and Friesen behind, and Whitlock just behind them. Whitlock could have finished the race right behind Friesen to defend the Drivers' Championship, but if his ambition was also to win the Team's Championship, then he'd want to risk fighting to get to the front. He got alongside Friesen, and in that moment a car rejoining too quickly collided with Friesen. Whitlock gained more places as cars ahead of him were in trouble. So Whitlock had jumped several places, but then disastrously was awarded a stop-and-go penalty while exiting the pits. He was dropped to 15th and was behind Friesen again, but was still high enough to potentially secure the championship by a single point. Eventually he was near the race leader, although a lap down, and there was almost a disaster as the car was spinning ahead. The race leader and then championship leader narrowly avoided a high-speed collision. At the end of this dramatic race, Jones, wanting to save fuel, waited for the race leader to cross the line, cutting his race distance short. Hutchings relieved him, outstandingly taking 3 wins in his first 3 races, especially impressive as he'd taken pole in the fastest lap. Whitlock was only running in 9th, but it was enough to secure him the Drivers' Championship with 1 race to spare, making him Zealous Racing League's 2nd GT3 champion. The battle of the Team's Championship was still raging on, as Tim Shade was alongside Walker across the line, getting himself onto the podium. And with that result, after 14 races proving a mixture of skill and consistency, the Shade brothers were finally leading the Team's Championship, but there was still 1 more race to go, and Rasmussen would return. Champion Whitlock closed out the last qualifying session in style, taking pole position in a gold liveried Bentley. Things could have gone better for the Shade Bros, as Tim was pointed backwards out of turn 2. But the other top teams were also in trouble. Walker and Friesen were only in 9th and 11th, and Whitlock and Rasmussen were no longer using a team livery, so their team would be awarded a points penalty at the end. It was absolute disaster for Friesen, as one driver missed his braking point and collided with him at the start of lap 2. Friesen's Bentley would limp all the way around the track to take a long pit stop repairing the damage. Even Whitlock was having trouble at the front, suffering an issue with his gear paddle which would sometimes upshift an extra gear. But despite that, managed to put an end to Hutchings' win streak, finishing ahead of him to take the final victory in the fastest lap. Jones took 3rd just behind Hutchings, and Rasmussen, importantly for the Team's Championship, was in 4th in his return, ahead of the Madhouse and Shade Bros cars. Friesen, recovering a few positions in 15th, managed to secure 2nd of the Drivers' Championship ahead of Tim Shade. The Bentley team were not awarded full points due to a team livery violation, but had done just enough to win the Team's Championship ahead of the Shade Bros, and close in 3rd were Madhouse Racing. All 3 of these teams had led the championship at some point, and competitively had taken it right to the last race.